So here we go, the big frozen shoulder challenge and issue that a lot of practitioners run into with their clients. So I want to talk about kind of overall approach that I take to address frozen shoulder with my clients. I've had great success, which is why I want to share this with you guys. But the overall principle that I want to kind of convey to you is that when we talk about frozen shoulder, I don't want you to just think about the arm or where your client is coming to you with pain. So they'll come to you and say it hurts in XYZ space or place. I want you to think about the whole shoulder complex, and that includes scapula and clavicle. And today I want to talk about scapula. When you've got a person who has frozen shoulder, one of the first things you want to do is confirm diagnosis, see if they do have adhesive capsulitis. And then you want to check range of motion. And one of the first easy ways to check for range of motion is to have them abduct their arm, right? So when they abduct their arm, we've got Mr. Otto here that we're using as an example, you want to see in anterior view and also posterior view, you want to see how much that scapula moves. In a lot of folks with frozen shoulder, you'll see that there's a lot of limitation of range of motion of the scapula. So when they go into this arm abduction, and there are different ways of asking for arm abduction. We're just going to start with kind of thumb out and arm abduction. You want to see how much that scapula moves. A lot of times what you'll see is that the arm will start to abduct, the scapula will start to stay still. It'll move maybe a little bit, but then it'll stop, and we've got a certain degrees of freedom that the scapula should move in abduction. We can look that up. But then what ends up happening is that if there's a frozen shoulder, Mr. Otto is going to start to raise his whole shoulder sort of like this to try to get the movement to happen. At that point, classically, most of the time, they'll tell you that they start to feel pain here, usually sort of anterior deltoid or part of bicep when they start to attempt this arm abduction. So not in every single case, but in a majority of the cases, what ends up happening when we ask for arm abduction and you see limitation of range of motion and they start to tell you that it starts to hurt here, a lot of the times what I start to think about is that this may be overworking, and it may be having to fight some other group of muscles or some other territory of myofascial tissue that is not allowing for that scapula to move. So in a lot of cases, this is why we have Mr. Otto here in the posterior view. In a lot of cases, Mr. Otto wants to watch too. What we have is that the teres muscles and sometimes the infraspinatus muscles are not allowing for this proper abduction to happen. And you think about it, if we've got teres fighting or not allowing arm abduction to happen, and we've got deltoids here, who do you think is going to win in that fight most of the time? Remember, teres are big, strong muscles. Delts are also good, strong muscles, but in a lot of cases, the teres is going to win the fight. And if the teres is tight for whatever reason, either an injury, some type of trauma, either emotional, stress, that type of thing, or some sort of dysfunction where the person is in some sort of functional pattern that is causing a dysfunction. Does this look familiar to you guys? In a lot of cases, this area may be tight, may stay contracted, and may not allow proper function. The deltoids and biceps then may have to fight, and when they fight the teres, we go into a strain pattern. And the strain then could be the pain signal that goes to the brain and tells the person, oh, you can't do this without pain. So in a lot of cases, when I ask my client to go through that range of motion exercise, and I see this happening, one of the first places I go to is teres. I go to this teres area and I work in this territory, and in other videos I talk about how I work. I could either work in the directional resistance way or in the directional ease way. I work in here, and then after a few minutes of working in this area, then I check and I reassess. And even if we have a couple of degrees more freedom and range of motion, now I know I'm going in the right direction. It's also important to work that area where the person feels the pain, feels the symptom. And it's not necessarily because working this area is going to quote unquote fix the problem, but in some cases it's because you want to make sure that your client feels like you listen to them and that you address that area that they came to you for, right? Usually I go to this area closer to the end of a session. I usually go to this area here in a frozen shoulder situation because I want them to feel the results. I want them to see and feel the results of the work. That also establishes some rapport, establishes a level of trust. They know that, or hopefully they know that I know what I'm doing, and then from there we can proceed to other areas. But one of the first go-to places is this teres area. I mentioned briefly infraspinatus, absolutely an area that I go to. Now, is infraspinatus completely involved with arm abduction and the action of arm abduction? At first you would say no, but we also have to think that we're not just working with from an anatomy or kinesiology point of view. Some of these muscle tissue, some of these myofascial tissues and fibers are related to teres. They may be indirectly related to teres, and then thus causing some sort of pull, possible tightness, possible contraction or engagement when there doesn't need to be engagement, and then they could be indirectly involved in the limitation in arm abduction. That was it, folks. Wanted to share that brief piece of information. If you have any questions, please go to moralesmethod.com. We offer exclusive videos for folks who subscribe. You can also look us up on Facebook, Morales Method. We're on Instagram, and hope to see you guys in future workshops. Alrighty, thanks.